When Queen Victoria gave birth, she had
I know it
chloroform,
hurts, but you must
privacy,
push.
and the finest
It's nearly
physicians.
over now, trust
When
me.
a poor woman gave birth, she had a crowded room, a basin of water, and hope. Both faced the same biological risk. But only one faced it alone. In Victorian Britain, childbirth was not a celebration. It was a confrontation. A confrontation with pain, with blood, with infection, with death. For centuries, women had delivered babies at home, guided by tradition and midwives. But the 19th century brought something new: industrialization, urban overcrowding, and the rise of male medical authority in the birthing room. The Victorian era, under Queen Victoria, is often remembered as a time of moral certainty and imperial power. But behind closed bedroom doors, thousands of women were dying. Approximately 1 in every 200 births ended in the mother's death. That number does not include the silent grief of stillbirths, or the infants buried before their first birthday. Childbirth was the great equalizer in danger. But it was not equal in suffering. This is the story of two worlds: the perfumed, dimly lit nursery of the wealthy, and the smoke-filled, crowded tenement room of the poor. Among the upper classes, childbirth was treated as an event requiring ritual, preparation, and withdrawal from society. It was called confinement. Weeks before her due date, a wealthy woman would retreat to a private bedroom. Curtains drawn. Visitors restricted. The room kept warm, sometimes excessively so, because cold air was believed to cause illness. The bed became both sanctuary and battlefield. She would be attended by a physician, often called a man midwife. By the early 19th century, childbirth among the wealthy had shifted from traditional female midwives to male doctors trained in anatomy and surgery. This shift symbolized something larger: medicine was becoming professionalized. But knowledge did not yet mean safety. Physicians like James Young Simpson began experimenting with anesthesia in the 1840s. In 1847, Simpson introduced chloroform into obstetrics. It was revolutionary. Pain, long considered an inevitable, even moral component of childbirth, could now be dulled. Religious leaders debated whether relieving labor pain defied divine will. But everything changed when Queen Victoria used chloroform during the birth of her 8th child in 1853. Her approval normalized it among the upper classes. Suddenly, pain relief became fashionable. But chloroform masked pain. It did not prevent infection. And infection was the true killer. Puerperal fever, also called childbed fever, was a silent predator. It often appeared days after delivery. Fever, abdominal pain, a foul smell, then rapid decline. The cause? Doctors did not know. Many believed it was caused by miasma, bad air. But a Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something disturbing. In hospitals where medical students performed autopsies and then delivered babies without washing their hands, death rates were significantly higher. Semmelweis introduced handwashing with chlorinated lime in the 1840s. Maternal mortality plummeted. But his ideas were rejected. Why? Because they implied doctors themselves were the carriers of death. Victorian medicine valued authority over humility. And so women continued to die. Rich and poor alike. For working-class women, there was no retreat into confinement. They worked until labor began. Factory floors, laundries, domestic service. Contractions started, and they walked home. Their delivery room was often the only room. One bed, shared with children, sometimes shared with lodgers. The attending midwife, often called a handywoman, charged a few shillings. She relied on experience, not formal training. But paradoxically, these traditional midwives sometimes caused fewer infections than physicians, because they were not performing autopsies beforehand. If a woman could not afford a midwife, she faced the dreaded workhouse. Workhouses were institutions for the destitute. Crowded. Underfunded. Emotionally humiliating. To give birth there meant social failure. Puerperal sepsis, massive bacterial infection. No antibiotics existed. Once infection spread, mortality was high. Hemorrhage, uncontrolled bleeding after delivery. Without blood transfusions or surgical precision, death could occur within hours. Convulsions caused by severe preeclampsia. Sudden seizures. Often fatal. No understanding of blood pressure mechanisms existed. If a baby was stuck, options were limited. Forceps were primitive. And in extreme cases, destructive operations were performed to save the mother. These procedures were brutal. But they reflect the grim arithmetic of survival. Infant mortality in late 19th century urban slums could reach 150 deaths per 1,000 live births. That means nearly 1 in 7 infants did not survive infancy. Common killers included cholera, diarrheal disease, malnutrition, contaminated milk. In industrial cities, clean water was rare. Milk was often diluted with unsafe additives. Babies fed improperly became weak quickly. For the poor, survival depended on environment. And environment was toxic. Poverty was so extreme that many families joined burial clubs. They paid small weekly contributions. If a child died, the club would fund a coffin and burial. It was a practical decision. But it reveals something profound. Death was expected. Grief was budgeted. Childbirth was not just about life. It was about probability. By the late Victorian era, germ theory began to gain acceptance. Scientists like Louis Pasteur demonstrated that microorganisms cause disease. Gradually, antiseptic practices spread. Doctors began washing hands. Instruments were sterilized. Maternity wards improved ventilation. Mortality rates began to decline. Not dramatically at first, but steadily. Modern obstetrics was born not from elegance, but from accumulated tragedy. Wealth offered comfort. It offered privacy. It offered anesthesia. But it did not guarantee survival. Poverty offered neither comfort nor rest. And it amplified every risk. Victorian childbirth was a mirror of society. Hierarchy entered the bedroom. Class determined environment. Environment shaped survival. But biology remained merciless. The Victorian era is often romanticized. But behind lace curtains and gaslight, women were fighting the most ancient battle of humanity. And too often, they were losing. In Victorian Britain, childbirth was not a moment of joy. It was a gamble. And the odds depended on which side of the city you called home.